Hey, from the Barista Course Hamburg, I'm just not giving up. I'm still on the hunt for a good but affordable espresso grinder. And whether or not we found it, you'll see in just a moment. But before we get to this little grinder, a quick note about us and a small request for you. We're still a very, very small channel, so of course we're thrilled about every new subscriber we get from you. That means if you're interested in this topic, if you'd like tips and tricks all about espresso and coffee, then it would be great if you'd subscribe to our channel, because that helps us enormously to take the next step and to be able to keep making and showing our videos. YouTube has also recently introduced something new for small creators like us who don't have that many followers yet. You can hype our channel or a video. That helps us become much more visible. So we appreciate every subscriber, we appreciate every like, every discussion, and especially every hype. For that, a heartfelt thank you to all of you. But now let's finally get to this little grinder. This grinder is from the company Wursch. It's a new release, and it's called the T38 Plus. This grinder comes in two versions. First, this one here, which is corded, and you get a small separate power adapter with it. This is it here. Unfortunately, the power adapter isn't built into the grinder, but then again, it is very, very small. And then there's a second version which has a built-in battery. That means you're mobile with the grinder if you go camping or something like that. The version with the built-in battery is simply called the T38, and this corded one here is the T38 Plus. So it's very easy to remember. The 38 designation refers to the burr set. Specifically, both versions have a 38mm conical burr set. And just like the burrs, the entire grinder isn't particularly large. With the bellows, it has a height of 28 centimeters, a width of 7 centimeters, and a depth of about 10 centimeters. And the interesting thing about this grinder is the price. It costs around 180 to 200 euros. The version with the battery is even a little cheaper. That's not much. That's not much for a small single-dose grinder. And with this low price, the question naturally arises, is the grinder any good or is it no good? Does the espresso taste good or not? However, it can't just grind for espresso, but actually the full range. That means you can grind everything with this grinder, from mocha pot all the way to cold brew. However, today we want to test it exclusively for espresso because that's our main topic and we just want to see how it performs. As is often the case with such affordable grinders, Wursch also makes bold claims about the quality and performance of this grinder. Whether it can deliver on that or not, we'll see in a moment. It's built entirely of metal and has a wooden base and a wooden lid and of course this little bellows here. And at first glance it looks very, very high quality. It's not particularly heavy. It feels very good in the hand. The workmanship looks truly excellent. It has a small magnetic cup which has a diameter of just under 49 millimeters. That's not quite the size I prefer, but you can still work with it excellently. As I said, it has a small magnet and it snaps in wonderfully. That too is all built to fit perfectly. Then the grinder is advertised as having an anti-static feature. This means that, in theory, the coffee grounds shouldn't build up a static charge during grinding. In theory. Unfortunately, that doesn't work with this grinder, especially now when we're having somewhat autumnal, slightly wintry temperatures, meaning we have low humidity at the moment. In that case, unfortunately, some of the coffee tends to stick inside this cup. Personally, that always annoys me. It's a solvable problem. There are plenty of grinders that have solved it, but we also shouldn't forget this grinder costs around 180 euros, and as you all know, we can easily avoid the static charge by adding a spritz or two of water to our coffee beans before grinding. Then we won't have that problem with this grinder anymore either. Adjusting the grinder works excellently. We can simply turn this upper part here and adjust it very, very finely since the thread is on the outside, which gives us a large radius. The markings are wonderfully easy to read, and now of course the question arises whether, when we change our grind setting, for example coming from a filter coffee setting back to espresso, we can find our grind setting again. In other words, whether we'll get the same brew ratio in the same amount of time in the cup. Well, that doesn't really work so great. We don't hit the exact same spot again when going from filter coffee to espresso, but it's close, and that's actually not bad at all. When switching between the individual grind settings, we always get a result where from one mark to the next, so from one unit to the next, the extraction time changes by about 12 to 14 seconds. This means, for example, we go down from 20 to 19, 18, 17, and then we can calculate that for the same amount of coffee, the extraction will be about 12 to 14 seconds shorter. However, you don't have to go from mark to mark. You can also make truly microfine adjustments, and with that, we can really dial in the result in the espresso very, very finely. It's just not that easy to find again, which I think is a bit of a shame. The grinder is very quiet overall. We get a reading of about 61 decibels with no beans inside and about 68 decibels when we're grinding beans. That's super quiet, so you can't complain about that. However, it does need quite a bit of time to grind the beans. We always get a result of around 30 to 35 seconds if we want to grind 18 grams of espresso beans. And I'd say let's just try it out now, and then we can measure exactly how much time we need for this grind setting for 18 grams of beans. All right, for that, we'll take our little scale here. Exactly 18 grams. And that brings us to the next topic, which is how much retention does the grinder have, and can it grind out those same 18 grams that we're now putting in? And it sounds a bit strained, you have to say, because the motor inside is of course super small. This means we haven't been able to do a long-term test yet. We have made a lot of espressos with it, but how it performs in the long run and whether the motor will hold up, we can't say that just yet, of course. $17.9 grams, and that's a result we get almost every single time. We measured the retention on this grinder, and it's always around 0.1 to 0.15 with a maximum of 0.2 grams. And that, of course, is a fantastic value. And even on the very first grind, meaning we unpacked the grinder and no coffee had been ground with it yet, we had a retention of about 0.2 grams. And after we used the bellows, we had a retention of 0.1 grams. Fantastic. And now the question is, how does it taste? Let's try that out now. The first espresso has been pulled. Let's have a look. Or rather, it's not really an espresso. It's almost a ristretto in terms of its brew ratio. But still, I thought, let's just give it a try. Very nicely chocolatey. So I have to be honest, I really like it that way. It tastes absolutely delicious. You get very chocolatey notes, very little, very, very little astringency. Very tasty. If I imagine this with milk now, I have to say, I think we'd get a very, very tasty flat white if we use both of these espresso shots for it. And now let's just try it with an espresso. I mentioned earlier that if we change the unit here by about 1 mark, we get about 12 to 14 grams more in the cup. I'd actually like to have around 36 to 40 grams in the cup. That means we need about 18 grams more. And I'm just going to try going 1.5 marks further, and then we'll see what the result looks like. So we finally managed it. It didn't work out quite as quickly as we had hoped. We first changed it by 1.5 marks and we saw hardly any change in our coffee. And then we needed another 4 attempts until we finally got to our espresso result. This means I'm now at a brew ratio of about 1:2, which is what I wanted to have. And let's try this one now. It smells quite good already. Very tasty. I really have to say, it tastes surprisingly good. And that's for a grinder that only costs just under 200 euros. So I think it's great. Of course, this isn't the peak result we can get out of this type of espresso, but it's a really tasty espresso. And especially as a cappuccino, I could imagine it being excellent. We have a small grinder here that's a bit difficult to dial in. So it's really not that easy. And as you can see, we now have a relatively large amount of static charge. But all in all, what the grinder achieves isn't bad. As always, the conclusion at the end, what's our personal take on this grinder? Fundamentally, you can say it's wonderfully made. It has high quality materials, it looks good. The only thing that personally bothers me a little, I don't know if you can see it, is that the wood colors are slightly different. They certainly could have paid a bit more attention during production to see if the two wooden parts resemble each other a bit more or if they're color matched. Otherwise, as I said, it's wonderfully made. The espresso tastes good. And what we have here is a grinder for under 200 euros that can produce a tasty espresso. And I think that's not bad at all. It has a few small disadvantages. That's the static charge. As I said, you can get around that by wetting our espresso beans a little, but when it's so boldly advertised that the grinder has no static charge, that they've built in an anti-static feature, and then you get this result here, it just doesn't add up. I think that's a shame, but I don't think that's a reason not to buy the grinder. It's a little difficult to adjust. You really have to make relatively fine adjustments to get to the result, but that's also quite manageable. So what is it suitable for? I personally believe, and this is really just my personal opinion, that I wouldn't use it as an everyday grinder. I think it's wonderful as a secondary grinder. If I say, okay, with my GBW grinder, where I can't easily swap out the beans, I'd like to try a different coffee, it's wonderful. You can use it for that very, very well. I'll probably even take it with me when I travel because it's nice and small, it's compact, it's light, and above all, as I said, you can get a tasty espresso out of it. Maybe you can think of something else it could be used for. Although I have to say, if you have a very small kitchen and not much space, then this grinder is really great. It's extremely compact. It takes a little while to grind, but I don't think that's a problem either. I'm curious to see how it performs with light roast beans. They are significantly harder than these medium to slightly dark roasted beans. I think we should try that out right away. That's a great idea. Let's do that now. So, and here we are with a light roast, and now let's give it a try. Of course, it naturally took a little while once again to find the right grind setting. Wonderful fruity notes. It definitely has something that is quite mango-like in its flavor. Superb. Yes, I have to say, it's absolutely delicious. Not too much acidity. This coffee has a high level of fruitiness. We extracted it with a 10-second pre-infusion with a brew ratio of about 1 to 2.5, which means we got 45 grams out. And I have to say, it was really wonderful, truly wonderful aromas. Delicious. Yes. Absolutely delicious. I'm amazed at what this little grinder is capable of. That's really interesting. Just write in the comments if you think this might even be a grinder for your everyday use. As I said, probably not for me personally, because it also takes too long for me. The adjustment isn't exactly optimal, but you can really use it wonderfully. We just noticed one more thing which I forgot to mention. Sometimes a small bean gets stuck. That means we recommend when you're at the end of the grinding process to pump the bellows a bit more forcefully so that the last bean really goes into the burrs and gets ground up. Yes, that's it for this little grinder. And I have to say, I'm quite happy that I finally found a grinder that I really like. I think it's good. It has its pros and cons. As I said, we tried to mention and figure all that out. But all in all, it's a grinder that was fun to use. And that for under 200 euros. And so in conclusion, all that's left is for me to say goodbye. I'd like to thank you for watching. And as I said, we appreciate every subscriber, every like, every bit of hype, so that we can also make a bit more progress with our channel in the future and can also buy more grinders for you, so we can conduct tests for you. Thanks a lot for watching, drink good coffee, and see you next time. Ba 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 ba